running isn't inherently bad for you from like a joint perspective or anything like that. Running is actually protective for your knees. If you're worried about some kind of osteoarthritis, running is actually protective against arthritis.
I was not at all a born runner, but one thing that really attracted me was how simple it is in terms of, you know, there is no much friction. You don't even need access to a gym. You literally take your shoes and off you go. So I like that. And I also like the fact that I felt a boost in my cognitive performance. I really had terrific ideas on my run and even better ideas when I got back from it.
I think race anxiety is very normal. If you didn't have any race anxiety, you would be a unicorn. The Olympic gold medalist in every event this past summer felt pre-race anxiety. They're just like you and me. They just have been doing it consistently for so long. The best way to get good at racing, to reduce your pre-race anxiety, to not put every race up on such a high pedestal that you think this is your make or break moment, is to race frequently.
Are you looking to boost your energy, improve your performance, and become a stronger, healthier runner? If so, this episode is just for you. I am delighted to introduce you to Jason Fitzgerald, host of the Strength Running podcast, renowned running coach, Men's Running Magazine's Influencer of the Year, and a columnist for Trail Runner magazine. Jason has helped thousands of athletes and busy professionals stay fit and injury-free with practical, easy-to-follow plans. We'll explore how to stay active, prevent injuries, and build routines to boost energy and maintain consistency, even with the busiest schedules. Welcome, Jason, to the Charlène Gisèle Show.
Thank you for that intro. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you on the show. So I feel like I need to tell you how I first heard about you. I was preparing for my first marathon and came across your podcast and was listening to it while I was training. So I first want to start the show by saying thank you.
Oh, that's so great to hear. Well, I hope your first marathon went really well.
It went well. I don't know if I would say really well, but I completed it, which was, I suppose, my measure of success at the time.
Oh, good then. Yeah, your first marathon is always something to celebrate, for sure.
It is, definitely. There was a lot of celebration going on. I'll tell you which one it was. It was the Médoc Marathon. And I don't know how much you know about this one, but it's been coined the longest marathon in the world because there are 20 wine testing along the route. So you run through the most beautiful wine castle in the region of Bordeaux, the home of fine wine, and you run through the castles, and at each castle you're welcome with not water but fine wines for a sample. So it is quite an interesting spin on marathon.
So, what I hear is that my marathon comeback needs to begin now because this marathon sounds like so much fun. Probably not the best opportunity for a fast time, but what an experience.
No, also perhaps not the one that you would recommend for health optimization.
Yes,
But I'll tell you this, Jason, you do see some interesting things along the way.
I can only imagine.
And I believe, if that's correct, it is one of the biggest dropout in terms of number of people that start and number of people that don't finish. So I believe we were 10,000 on the starting line, and I think 8,000 completed, which from what I've heard is quite interesting in terms of rate. But people get quite drunk. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah, well, 21 wine tastings, that's going to happen.
That's gonna happen. So on that note, I would love to dive into the topic of running, and I really want to hear your story. I would love if you could share your story with our listener today. How did you fall in love with running? Because if I understand correctly, it was not an instant love affair, was it?
No, it certainly wasn't. And, running is a hard thing to fall in love with because running often doesn't feel very good. And it was a very unlikely love story. When I was a kid and I was in middle school, we had track and field week, and I did everything in my power to avoid anything that included any running whatsoever. So I was the 105-pound kid throwing the shot put and doing what I could to avoid any running event. But when I got to high school, I thought that cross country was similar to track, and I thought that I could high jump. And I had fun high jumping a little bit in middle school, even though I was relatively short for my age. But I showed up to cross country practice in basketball shoes and long mesh shorts, and quickly realized that, oh no, cross country is all running, no field events whatsoever. What have I done? But I was very fortunate to have a great coach. I really looked up to him. He was a great guy. And the guys on the team were, just great guys to hang out with. They were funny. And I was like, okay, well, I do want to do a fall sport. Let me stick with this. I got some outside encouragement from friends and family. And after a couple weeks, I started to see some progress. And I really enjoyed that progress. I loved the just feeling of getting better, of putting in the work and then seeing results. And that happens fairly quickly as a new runner. And so it was really fun for me to put in the work and then see results. And it was a very simple formula for me. And that's really what made me fall in love with running way back in 1998. And so I've been running ever since. I actually just finished my run like 20 minutes ago. I'm surprised I'm on time today, but here I am, 26 years later, and I'm still running almost every day because I just love the practice of running.
I love that you said that, and I feel very grateful that I'm going to get the benefit of the runner's high during this recording, right? You're going to be at your sharpest, most focused state because you just got back from a run. So, lucky us.
I hope so.
I was wondering actually, since we dived into that topic, do you notice a net benefit from running onto your cognitive performance? Because I'll be perfectly honest, that was something that was really attractive to me. I was not at all a born runner, but one thing that really attracted me was how simple it is in terms of, you know, there is no much friction. You don't even need access to a gym. You literally take your shoes and off you go. So I like that. And I also like the fact that I felt a boost in my cognitive performance. I really had terrific ideas on my run and even better ideas when I got back from it. Is that something that you've noticed as well?
Oh, 100%. And the research really backs this up. Aerobic exercise has a great way of helping you cognitively, but also emotionally. So you're better at emotional management. Your creativity often is increased both during and after running. Some of my best ideas happen when I'm out there running. I'm not listening to music or listening to a podcast. I guess your podcast or the strength running podcast are the only two that people are allowed to listen to when they run.
That's it.
But
That's
yeah,
it. Nothing
that's
else.
it. But when you're running, just by yourself, you're not listening to music, the benefits are profound because yes, you get this nice boost in creativity. After the run, you get this wonderful boost of endorphins and feel good hormones. And the great thing about that is that you don't need to go run for an hour and a half. You don't have to go do a really hard workout. Whereas if you go into the gym and you say do a 45-minute lifting workout, if that workout isn't pretty challenging, you're not going to get the same emotional regulation and cognitive benefits afterward. Whereas aerobic exercise has really been shown to give you those benefits. And you don't need a lot of it, and it doesn't have to be super high intensity. You can just go for a very easy 30-minute jog, and that's really fantastic for your mental health and just putting you in a really good position for the rest of the day. So I am personally a morning runner. I like to run first thing in the morning. And I feel like, just like making your bed as soon as you get up, it gives you that first win of the day. And by starting your day with that win, by doing something very productive for yourself, it then allows you to just build on that momentum for the rest of the day. So I think it's a wonderful practice. And of course, like you said, it doesn't really require any equipment. It doesn't require a facility. You don't need any special equipment to go do it or fancy gear. You really only need a good pair of running shoes and some athletic clothes, which most people typically have. So it's very accessible. You can get a lot out of it in a short amount of time, and the cognitive and emotional benefits are pretty astounding.
And I love what you said about starting in the morning. I'm also a morning runner. And the reason for that is because I notice it sets a tone for the day, meaning that I've noticed my behavioral patterns, even around nutritional choices or hydration or my inner dialogue, my voice, inside my head is way different. If I've had a run under my belt, I will make healthier choices to support that victory throughout the day. Whereas, if you've had that day where you actually said you were going to run, but you don't run, then you start to feel a bit sorry for yourself and you feel like you failed at accomplishing that one simple thing you said you were going to do, kind of affects your confidence and your self talk. And it kind of spirals out from there. Have you noticed that as well?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you're essentially breaking a promise to yourself that
Mm.
you've made, and that never feels good. Um, and I also think the opposite is true, that you don't just put yourself in a good position after you've done your morning run. It's more that after 5 years of doing a morning run, you are an entirely different person. And the self efficacy, the confidence, the grit, the determination, the belief in yourself, you think you believe in yourself now. Wait until you have trained consistently for years and years and improved a lot, and shown yourself that you can do things that you previously thought that you couldn't do. That is a very, very powerful forcing function to helping you just be successful in the rest of your life. Because if you can successfully navigate a challenging career and a family, and also train for and race a fast 10K or half marathon or marathon, what can't you do? So it really does improve your self image. And I think the longer you do it, the more consistent you are. And, the more aggressive your goals are, and the fact that you're accomplishing them, that can really go a long way at helping you really build that self belief so that you can go and tackle any challenge, any goal that you might have, whether it's starting a new business, getting that big promotion at work, making partner. Those things become very, very manageable when in your personal life you have done things that aren't very manageable, and you have done it. So that is really powerful.
Yes. And I think that it builds up your resilience to adversity as well. And particularly what I'm thinking about here, Jason, and I would love your input, is the fact that running outdoors, particularly when the climate is not favorable, is super empowering. Now, I was for years the sort of indoor AC temperature control person, and I really embraced the challenge of running when it was a bit too hot, a bit too cold, a bit too miserable, bit raining, and to actually not make that an excuse and to think there is no such thing as bad weather, there is just bad mindset, and to go through the motion of running no matter what. And then you just feel so much stronger because you've done something hard and you can apply that resilience to your corporate day to day, right?
100%. Yeah. I mean, you're essentially overcoming some level of adversity, whether that is, a windy day, a rainy day, a really cold day, a hot and humid day. And I would say that, there is the possibility of having a bad mindset, but there's also the ability to have poor clothing choices. So as long as you have the right gear, you can pretty much go run in almost any condition. Now, of course, don't do anything that's going to jeopardize your health or anything like that. But after 26 years of running, there are very, very few weather conditions in normal circumstances where you shouldn't go running. Like, yeah, maybe don't go outside when there's a lightning storm and you want to go run on the golf course at the top of a hill. Maybe that's not the greatest idea. But for the most part, you could put on a raincoat, you can put on an extra layer, you could take off a layer, whatever the weather demands, and you're going to feel okay. And then once you do that, I mean, I have run in a tropical storm. I have run when it's 45 degrees Celsius outside. I have run in pretty much every awful weather condition that you can imagine. a typhoon one time in Australia. That was a particularly memorable run. But if you do this, you then kind of look at, oh, I have to give a presentation at work. Well, I just ran 10 miles in a hurricane. Like, why am I intimidated by a presentation at work? So again, it builds this level of toughness, of mental toughness in your brain that then allows you to think of every other obstacle or challenge or goal that you have in life as completely surmountable. Because if you can run in a hurricane, if you can run when it's hot or cold, you can do anything.
Yeah, I like that. I've very much felt that as well. I think it builds up your confidence, and that has a domino effect on so many aspects of your lives that you wouldn't even suspect. So it's really empowering. And I was wondering if I could switch gear a bit and play devil's advocate. So, really hit you with the common objection that I hear most often and see how you can help to convince me. Let's say I was, on the fence about starting my running journey and came up with a bunch of reasons why I shouldn't be running. Could you help me out there?
Yeah. What are some of your reasons for not running?
Well, I'll tell you the ones that I hear from my clients. So, number one, most universal that I hear is, I have no time.
That is a common one. It's a classic. And look, there's no denying that certain people have very real limitations on their time. So, if you're working really hard to make partner this year, maybe it's not the time to go train for a marathon. So, at a certain level, you have to be realistic with your limitations and the time that you do have. There's a lot of folks on Wall Street who work 12-hour days and they work 6 days a week. It's going to be challenging to get in quote unquote legitimate training in those conditions. In my coaching experience, a lot of my clients just need to reprioritize things and really look at their schedule and try to find the time and really not just find time, but actively make time. And I think there's a real clear distinction between, oh, let me see where I can put this in, and instead flipping that and saying, no, 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 I'm going to fit this in. How can I fit this in? And so when you have that mentality of, I'm going to get in my 45-minute workout today no matter what, you do end up finding some areas of your schedule where you can fit that in, whether it's a lunch hour, whether you have to get up early, whether you start run commuting into work and then taking a quick shower at the gym. There's a lot of creative ways to sort of get that bout of exercise in during the day. Bigger picture, I would definitely recommend to any busy professional to think really long term, because I think it's really easy to sacrifice your health for your career when you're 30, 35, maybe 40. That will start to sneak up on you when you're starting to be in your 40s and particularly in your 50s. And so if you really want to optimize your prime earning years, which I think are, late 40s to 50s, maybe early 60s, right before you retire, you've got to be in good health and you need to be vigorous. You need to have energy. You need to, have a certain amount of strength to work consistently and to have that creativity and drive to be professionally successful. And just like we were talking in the first half of this conversation, a lot of the benefits that you get from running, from that consistent habit, really bleed into your professional life and even your social life as well. So I think thinking long term is a really powerful forcing function to get folks to prioritize their health, because as soon as your health goes away, you realize, oh, there's not really much else that I care about. Because as soon as you don't feel good, as soon as you have some disability, as soon as you're unable to be as physically active as you previously were, it's the only thing that you'll tend to think about. And, if you could sacrifice a little bit in your past so that you could not have whatever current illness, ailment, injury, etc., that you currently have, most people would make that trade in a second. So I think the long-term play is maybe sacrifice a little bit so that you can get in some amount of exercise. I'm not saying go train for a marathon, but I think a lot of folks can run 20 to 30 miles a week. They can do a little bit of intensity, They can do some basic strength training, and that's going to go so far at maintaining your health, at boosting your longevity, but more importantly, just keeping you healthy for a longer period of time so that you could actually focus on your career and your family at a higher level.
Absolutely. And I think as well, especially if you're struggling with burnout or, dark thoughts, and overwhelm, chronic anxiety, running is one of the healthiest thing that you can do because it gets you a little bit out of your head and it gets you to focus on something slightly different, which is not necessarily a KPI orientated, and it is very rewarding. You get this quick feedback loop and you can track it and measure it. I find huge amount of satisfaction when I go back through my Nike Runners app or any other app that I've used, and I look at my data over the years and I'm like, oh my goodness, I've made that much progress. This is one of the most satisfying feeling that you can get. It's like instant feedback.
Yeah, and you get to look back and see your progress. I encourage any runner to carry to fill out a training log, because
Mm.
you can look back on it and it's this amazing primary document of your personal progress. It shows where you started, the journey you took, where you are today. I have an entire bookshelf of training logs going back to my high school years, and if my house ever burned down, that's going to be one of the first things that I grab is my training logs, because it's some of the oldest possessions that I have, and it's some of the most personal things that I have. They are so valuable to me because of precisely that. They show your progress. And yeah, I think it's just an incredible journey to have, and it's very rewarding.
Now, what would you say to folks that perhaps got convinced at this point? They're like, okay, Jason, you convinced me. I'm going to schedule my runs. But then they go, oh, but I don't want to get injured. I've heard that running is bad for my knees and I see all those injuries, and no, 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 I don't want any of that. I'm sure you've heard that before. And sometimes running does have a bad rep. Even when I said to some of my clients or friends or community member, I'm doing a half, I'm training for marathon. Oh, are you going to hurt yourself? Is that safe? Obviously that typically doesn't come from runners, but you do hear that quite a lot. What would you say there?
Well, so the tricky thing here is that two things are true at the same time. Number one, running isn't inherently bad for you from like a joint perspective or anything like that. Running is actually protective for your knees. If you're worried about some kind of osteoarthritis, running is actually protective against arthritis for folks. And you're not, predisposed to getting some certain injury just because you run. Now, with that said, running does have a high injury rate because running is an impact sport. We kind of look at other sports like, American football, for example, is probably the most extreme example where that's an impact sport and nobody's tackling you and running. That's not allowed. So it's not an impact sport. But that's not true at all. Every step you take puts 2 to 6 times your body weight of forces through your body. So you're sort of tackling yourself every single time that you take a step when you're out there running. So running can be a sport that opens you to the potential risk of injury. And I think one of the reasons why is that training errors are just very common. So, I think there's this idea that, well, anyone can go running. So it's a kind of simple thing to do. I can go train for a 10K, no big deal. I'll just download a plan online. And it's that kind of attitude toward running that I think increases the injury potential of the sport, because the progression of mileage or intensity is often fairly high. And that's where you get hurt. You get hurt by doing a little bit too much before you're ready for it, a little bit too fast before you're ready for that intensity, and a little bit too soon before your body is fully recovered and adapted to that stress. So there is an injury risk. Now, with that said, there's a risk every time you walk down the street. And if you don't want to start running because you're scared of injuries, I would say, well, don't ever lift a weight. Don't pick up a basketball. Don't ever get a soccer ball. Like, there's always the risk of getting injured in any sport. What I would say is just build some common sense injury prevention strategies into your program. Number one, you can always talk to a coach. They're going to be your first line of defense at helping you avoid some of these major training errors. But some of these common sense strategies are things like, not increasing your mileage very quickly. Be a little bit more conservative than you really think is necessary, because, a good mindset is tomorrow's run is just as important as today's run. So don't do anything today that's going to jeopardize tomorrow. Another thing that you can do is strength train. If you are a runner who wants to train for races, now you're starting to get into like the actual sport of running rather than just using it as a tool to stay healthy. And I would say, look, runners would be best served by thinking of themselves as athletes that specialize in running. We're not runners, we are athletes that specialize in running. And that just opens up the door to more training strategies. So we're not just going to run, we're also going to lift weights. We're also going to do form drills. We're also going to do strength training. We're going to do core exercises. We are going to do dynamic flexibility movements. We're going to cross train with some aerobic exercise to supplement our running. And there's so many other things that we can do besides just the very specific act of running itself. Just like, soccer players do not just play soccer every day. They do all kinds of other things to condition themselves for the sport. We need to do that as well. So the other major thing I'll say is if you're going to be running and you have any kind of performance expectations on yourself, like you want to run a certain time or you want to build to a certain distance, let's work in some strength training into our program. It's going to really help you get stronger, toughen up those connective tissues, even increase the durability of your bones. And it's really going to help give you a little bit of extra armor to protect yourself against the forces of running. And your injury risk is likely going to decrease. It's never going to be zero, but there's a lot of really easy things that we can do to reduce that risk.
I'm so glad that you brought that up because that is the exact journey and path that I've been on. So when I started to run, it was very much a pragmatic solution. It was a mental health intervention, a burnout recovery plan, get me out of my head, get me fitter. It was very much a protocol that I used to assist my physical and mental well-being. And my love for it did not start there, like at all. I don't remember loving my first run. I actually cried, I think, during my first run. It was not particularly pretty. But when you start to love it over the years and you start to develop a bit of a not necessarily competitive edge but an interest in racing, and you start to think, oh right, maybe I could train for my first half, maybe I could train for my first marathon, then you become really interested in everything else that you need to do, right? So I dived into strength training and mobility and flexibility and recovery. And actually what I find is, although I did do those things with a race goal in mind, it does make you a better rounded person in your fitness journey, because everything that you do that supports your running journey also supports your cardiovascular health, your general strength, your flexibility. And when I look back at how I used to feel before I started to run, I had so much chronic pain. I was riddled with constant lower back pain, had clicky shoulders, very stiff neck. And actually, at least for me, running has been the solution to having less injury rather than having more injury. I feel much more mobile now. I'm much stronger now because I'm a runner than when I wasn't.
Yeah, that's a story that I hear a lot because the key to like feeling well and not feeling old, for lack of a better word. You don't want to constantly feel like you're sore, like you're tight, that you're not mobile, is a movement practice, and running can be a really great part of that movement practice. And if you're also including some things like strength training, you're warming up dynamically for your runs, which is going to improve your mobility and your flexibility. Maybe you're doing yoga once a week. You could do so many other types of exercise that are going to help your running performances if you're interested in running a race. But at the same time, for the very same reasons that they're helping you become a better runner, they're also improving other aspects of your physical self. So yes, you're gaining endurance and getting faster, but you're also getting stronger, you're building power, you're improving your mobility and overall flexibility. And the combination of all that just makes it so that you feel really good on a day-to-day basis. And as long as you're making smart decisions with your exercise program and you're not adding too much intensity or too much volume too quickly, then you're going to continue to feel pretty good most of the time. Now, there is that, very famous rule of thirds, where if you're training for a race, a third of your runs are going to feel great, a third are going to feel okay, and a third are probably not going to feel good at all. And that's also very normal. So I don't want to paint this impression that you're always going to feel like some elite athlete if you start a good training program. You are going to feel tired sometimes and fatigued and sore. Like, that's part of the process. And if you didn't feel that way, there wouldn't be the adaptations that come with that stress. So you wouldn't actually be getting stronger, faster, gaining more endurance, etc. So some of that is normal, but you're absolutely right. A well-rounded exercise program is the closest thing we have to feeling as superhuman as possible.
I'm glad that you brought up the training and the racing, because I do have to say that I was a little shocked by how much time investment and commitment I had to put into my marathon training. I was perhaps a bit naive, but I wanted to do it well. So I got coached, I got a program, and I was quite meticulous about, doing it as much as I could in terms of having my mobility, my nutrition on point, and it did feel a little bit like a part-time job. I remember this summer when I was training for my marathon, I literally dreamt about running. I woke up in the morning to my fiance saying, I actually have been dreaming about really running for the past 3 days. And this became a bit of a sort of thing that I was thinking about all the time, because you think, oh, the way I eat my breakfast, right? No, I want to have my run first, but then I have a long run. So I need to change when I eat my lunch, and then I need to go to bed at a certain time. And you can get a little bit perhaps obsessive. So now I'm switching gear and I'm talking about that sort of race prep. I did feel a little bit of performance anxiety and a little bit of race overwhelm. And it did feel like quite a lot in terms of the level of commitment. I'm so glad that I've done it and I love the process. But want to, explore that kind of first time racer mentality. What would you say that folks need to hear if they do want to run their first marathon, for example?
So I don't like to really put races up on a pedestal, like a marathon is definitely a difficult undertaking. That's one of the hardest events that you could participate in as a runner. So if you haven't started running yet, like, go tackle a 5K or a 10K, go find a shorter middle distance event and really get good at all of the habits that are going to make you into a good marathoner, like running consistently, you know, getting in that good long run every weekend, gradually building up that distance, doing some kind of structured, faster workout during the week, and really just kind of, okay, I'm a runner now. I'm going to do things that runners do. And then you build that habit and you get consistent with it. And then you start to build some mastery. You start getting good at 5Ks. You start getting really consistent with your training. It's a lot easier then to go into the marathon. Now, I think race anxiety is very normal. If you didn't have any race anxiety, you would be a unicorn. The Olympic gold medalist in every event this past summer felt pre-race anxiety. They are just like us. I talked to some of the best runners in the world on the Strength Running podcast. They're just like you and me. They just have been doing it consistently for so long that it's just sort of like a public speaker, like if you're worried about public speaking, you need to do a lot of public speaking and you need to start small and then build up to Madison Square Garden. The marathon is like Madison Square Garden. Don't go from your couch to Madison Square Garden. Build up your skills first. And, for anyone struggling with that mindset for racing, it's like I think the public speaking analogy is perfect because, you know, what are people most scared of? You know, for most of us, it's public speaking. And if you can do it very frequently, you know, giving a toast one night and then going to Toastmasters the next night and, you know, doing a 10-minute speech and just constantly exposing yourself to that low level stress is going to make you believe in yourself a lot more over time, and you're going to improve your skills. Same exact thing with racing. Racing is a skill. How do you pace yourself? Should you go out fast? Should you go out slow? Should you go out kind of middle of the road? Should you run an even race? Should you race, you know, a negative split, or should you go out fast and hope that your positive split isn't too bad? How do you respond to a competitor who might try surging past you? When is the best time to surge past one of your own competitors? Should you do it at the bottom of a hill or in the middle of a hill or right as you crest the top of the hill? There's 1,001 of these little decisions that go into racing, and the best way to get good at racing, to reduce your pre-race anxiety, to not put every race up on such a high pedestal that you think this is your make or break moment, is to race frequently. And that's why I do like to see runners doing some of those, you know, local 5Ks, getting into a 10K, those races where you don't have to train for 6 months to just finish the race. You don't have to recover for a month after the race because it's beaten your body up so much. You know, you get really proficient at racing when you do it frequently. And the only way to do it frequently is by focusing on the shorter distances. So let's do that first. And then if you really want to go do a marathon, you'll then have the fitness, you'll have the know-how, you'll have, you know, some of those general physical skills already built. And not only is the marathon training going to be a lot more manageable, it's not going to be so overwhelming, but you're also just going to have a better result on race day.
You know, I'm really glad that you brought that up because I think it's important not to put races on a pedestal, but it's also important to have that clear vision. At least for me, and I can only speak about my journey here, I found that having races to thrive for and to commit to really motivated me to keep up that discipline and consistency. So I remember the very first race, the official, race that I ever got was a 10K, which at the time felt very intense. And I was running it in the south of France with my fiance, and it was a run by the beach, which made it a bit more challenging because sand running is a bit harder than road running, at least I think, because it's quite a tough terrain. You think sand is exotic and cool, but as I'm sure you know, it's actually quite tough to run on sand. But when I had that race booked in, it just gave me that sort of, runway to look forward to. And I was just doing a bit of a countdown, and that helped me maintain the consistency. So I would run consistent 5Ks and then build up to that 8K excitement. And then I got my 10 and I got really happy. I celebrated. And then a few months later, it was actually on a birthday that one of my very dear friend Mishka bought me a ticket for a half marathon run as a birthday present. And having that 6 months ahead of the race has really built up my motivation and endurance because I had something to run for. And I think that's so important when you have something to run for. Do you agree with that? Having, like, say, one race a quarter or one event in the book that you have to look forward to and run for to consistently train and run.
Yeah, I do think that having a race on the schedule is really motivating, and it can give you this concrete, very tangible thing to look forward to. So, yeah, if you're someone who kind of struggles to train consistently, then putting something on the schedule, you know, whether it's a 5K or a marathon, as long as you know, have the time to train appropriately for it, I think is a really valuable strategy just to get yourself get yourself just excited about the training process so that you know you're actually building to something. You're not just grinding every day for the sake of it. You're actually working towards something very specific. So yeah, that can be very helpful. I would say though that if you are training for shorter distances and you know you've been running for more than a couple months, you can run a lot more than just once a quarter. So something like a 5K or a 10K, You could have, say, a 12 to 16 week season with 3 to 4 races clustered sort of in the second half of that season. Just
Mm.
like a track and field athlete, or just kind of think of a collegiate athlete schedule where they have many cross country races, and they start having championship races, and then there's the final national championship race. That's sort of like your goal half marathon, but you can run a series of 5Ks or a 10K ahead of time to help yourself get into better shape, to practice the skill of racing, and to also just benchmark your performances. So if you all of a sudden start racing much faster than you thought you were going to, well, you're demonstrating that you're in a much better level of performance. Your fitness is higher. So maybe that means we have to change your goal race goals. Maybe that half marathon goal of, say, getting under 2 hours is too easy. Maybe our goal should be getting under an hour 50, because you've just shown how good you are in the 5K and the 10K. So you can do a lot with some of those shorter distances. And I would certainly encourage runners to, if they're interested in it, to schedule more middle distance races.
Yeah, I think middle distance are very important. How do you feel about the question that I'm sure comes up from your clients as well of, well, I'm initially interested in running because I want to lose weight. And I'm now not interested in running because when I run, I'm more hungry. So I'm actually not losing the weight that I signed up for. So I'm going to stop running. I'm sure you've come up with that. Tell us more.
Yes. So there's no doubt that your diet is like 80% of weight loss. So if you have weight loss goals, cleaning up your diet is going to give you 80% bang for your buck, whereas exercise is the final 20%. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. If you start an exercise habit, whether it's running, lifting weights, pickleball, whatever it might be, it's going to increase your caloric needs. So you're going to feel hungrier. You're going to want to eat more. All weight loss is an energy balance equation. So if you want to lose weight, you need to be in a slight calorie deficit. It can be hard to be in a calorie deficit if you're running, because running is actually one of the forms of exercise that burns the most number of calories per hour. So an hour run is worth more from a calorie burn perspective than, say, an hour of lifting weights. You'll typically burn more calories via running. Now, it's always just a balancing act of, you are trying to burn, kind of like as many calories as possible, but at the same time, still maintain that energy deficit so that you can continue losing weight. So if you're struggling to lose weight because you're running and hungry, just know that, weight loss is going to mean that you're going to be a little bit hungry sometimes because you're in a calorie deficit. That's just part of the process of weight loss. And at this stage, I would certainly encourage someone to go talk to a registered dietitian who can focus on meals that are going to satiate you, and give you the macronutrients and micronutrients that you need while still being in a calorie deficit.
Yeah, I'm glad you've mentioned that. And I think there are also some errors that folks make around the chase for calories when running by supplementing with really unhealthy things. And unfortunately, the health and fitness industry is riddled with really unhealthy running. Well, I don't want to use the word nutrition because I don't think it's nutritional, but running foods. And actually you can do so much by using natural food. I ran dates and water with salt or maple syrup, and I think there are so many things that you can do not to succumb to the lure of hyper processed food that can also contribute to actually poor health and to make you feel like you're entering into a negative loop. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's a time and a place for some of those processed foods. If you're trying to race a fast marathon, you don't want to be drinking maple syrup. I'd be worried that it would be easy to overconsume a natural food because you're not exactly sure how much of it you're putting in your body. Whereas if you have a gel or some kind of bar or the equivalent, you know exactly what the calories are that are in it, the carbohydrate content of it. And so I think it's important to make a distinction between your diet and overall nutrition, and then the more sports specific fuel that you use to fuel your sports specific activity. So,
Mm.
if you're going out for a 20-mile long run, I think there's a really good argument to be made that some of that processed food is actually better for your performance. I just interviewed the Leadville 100-mile course record holder who just set almost an impossible record. He did a lot of supplementation with processed foods, and it led to the fastest course record on one of the most challenging 100-mile distances on the planet. He's not going to get that kind of a performance if he's trying to eat peanut butter sandwiches and dates and mixing his water with homemade salt and maple syrup. It's just not going to happen. So there's a time and a place for everything. I would say be very strategic with the processed foods around your running, immediately before, during, and after. But all the other times, focus on nutrient dense, whole, minimally processed, real foods as much as possible. Also, with the understanding that, look, if you're a 25-year-old who's running 80 miles a week or 140 kilometers a week, you have flexibility in your diet. And, when I was running my fastest was the time where I cared the least about my diet, partly because I was just a young guy who was running a lot of miles. Some of them were very high intensity, and I had the flexibility in my physiology to be able to do that. So
Mm.
I think you just need to be really aware of where you're at. Are you 40 years old with 3 kids like I am now? I can't make those same decisions. So it does depend a little bit on who you are, how you're training, and what you're training for.
You've brought up your age and the fact that you're a blessed father of three. I was wondering if you could tell us whether you have changed your running strategies around the fact that, you were entering different seasons of your life and different decades. How did you shift your strategies, if at all, to naturally flow with your life progression?
I have shifted my approach to running over the years. From 1998 to 2015, I was focused on performance. I wanted to be the fastest runner I could be, and I did everything in my power to do exactly that. That meant running 85 to 90 miles a week, doing 2 or 3 hard workouts a week, doing long runs up to 22 miles. I'm sorry for all the imperial distances here, but that's just how my brain sort of works.
Oh, that's fine.
Um,
I can convert, no problem.
and my singular goal during those years was I want to be the best runner that I can be. Now, when my second child was born, I was just about, let's see, 32 years old, and I had been training pretty competitively for about 17 years. And it became a little bit more challenging to dedicate a 3-hour block of time every single day to my training, which was sort of an average most days when you included the warm up and the run and the strength training and some of the recovery strategies and getting ready all around that. I really needed a 3-hour block of time. I no longer had that 3-hour block of time when I had a 2-year-old and a newborn, and I was trying to provide for my family. So, my approach now is, I still run pretty much every day. I do all the things that you will see in a training program, like a long run, workouts, strides, a dynamic warm up, strength training. I do all those things, but everything is scaled so far back and there's not as much progression. So I don't build my mileage very high. I don't run the same hard workouts that I used to. And my approach now is much more about overall health, longevity, and my ability to be able to go for a 10-mile run with my friends out on the Front Range here in Colorado. I want to be able to go trail running in the mountains and just experience that beauty with my buddies. And I want to be able to have the fitness to do that. I don't really need to be able to run a 4:30 mile like I used to. That's not going to happen now that I'm 40. I really did a good job of taking advantage of my 20s, of my sky high levels of testosterone. Like there's a reason why the best athletes in the world are generally in their 20s or early to mid 30s. Once I was sort of out of that time frame and I had a family, then I scaled everything back and focused more on health and longevity.
So now that we are touching upon your personal life and your running stories, I was wondering if you could share with us one of your most challenging run and how you overcame the challenge, and one of your greatest achievement when it comes to running and the reason why it was such a great achievement.
Oh, that's a tough question. Let's start with my most challenging run. Maybe I'll say my most challenging race. Um, let's go with the 2008 New York City Marathon. It was my
Okay.
first marathon. I was 2 years out of college, and that meant I was young and cocky, and very much, a middle distance guy at heart. I'd run a 10-mile race, a half marathon, but most of my training and racing was geared towards 10K and shorter. And I did not realize how challenging the marathon would be. I thought I was going to run, you know, mid to high 230s in the marathon. I thought that I would be negative splitting the race and, running 540 miles through Central Park to the finish of the New York City Marathon. And it was the complete opposite. I had a decent overall finish time. I think I ran 244, but it wasn't run in a way that gave me a lot of confidence. So I slowed down a lot. It was very painful. I had some miles in the final 10K that were just as slow as some of my easy running paces, and it felt completely awful. And so that was a real wake up call that, hey, you might actually be a fast runner, but you have not mastered this distance yet. And you have a lot to learn about how to race 26.2 miles really fast. And so that was a humbling experience, especially when a senior citizen just blew by me at like mile 24 of the marathon, like I was standing still. That is not something a 24-year-old collegiate track athlete is used to, and it will really put you in your place. So, that was one of my most challenging because it was very humbling. The performance was just admittedly very uncomfortable. It was a very painful race for me, and I didn't run another marathon for about 3 years because I didn't want anything to do with the marathon after that race. I was like, oh, this distance is awful. Let's do other things. So that one sticks out to me as one of my most challenging races ever. Yeah, I could probably sit here and talk about dozens of terrible races in over my career. That's something that you kind of have to get used to as a runner is having a bad race, a poor performance. It's just going to happen. Um, but looking back, I would say that a race that I'm really proud of, it was my next marathon because I learned a lot. I changed my training approach. I stayed healthy for longer than I ever had before. I got a lot stronger. I was much more strategic about how I approached the marathon and how I approached my training. And I accomplished my goal. I broke 240. I ran a 239.32, and I didn't have that really epic slowdown at the end of the race. So, to me, one of my favorite performances is my marathon PR of 239 because it came after one of my worst races. I executed really well. I accomplished my goal. I remember crossing the finish line and just thinking to myself, oh my God, I did it. Like
Mm.
that feeling is priceless, and I still think about it sometimes to this day.
And I'm curious, what got you from I don't like this distance when you ran your first marathon to 3 years later tackling the challenge again? What mindset shift did you have to make to take up the challenge?
Well, I can't let the marathon win now, can I? It's as
I
simple as that.
like that. When I got to the finishing line of my marathon, I actually genuinely, one of the first thought was, I can't wait to train for the next. Genuinely, I was, exhausted and it was a huge effort, but I thought, well, I just can't wait to improve. That's what I'm thriving for now, is the next one where I can do a greater, better performance. I found it quite exhilarating. The thought that there is now knowing that I can and knowing that I will only do better. That's quite exciting.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of why I fell in love with running at the very beginning was, you finish a race, even a workout or a run, and your mind immediately goes to, I can do better. I can
Right.
do this a little bit better. Maybe if my prep was a little bit more strategic. There were a couple times that I cut the workout early, or I didn't do the long run. I chose a hard course for this effort. There's a million and one things you can start thinking about improving for the next time. So, that's spoken like a true runner. You finish a race and you go, I can be better because I can now look back on my training log. I can look back on how I executed this race, and I can create a whole laundry list of items that I can then improve the next time around. And if you do that enough times, enough cycles, not just for the marathon, but for the 5K, for the 10K, for the mile, you do a 3K indoor track race, like I'm very agnostic when it comes to distance. Everything has something to offer. The more training cycles you go through, the better you're going to be, because the more you're going to learn about yourself, the training process, and what works for you.
Hmm. Jason, I would like to end by asking you one last question, if I may. What is the greatest lesson that running has taught you?
I think the greatest lesson that running has taught me is that I can do hard things. I can set a goal that's very challenging, that's far off, and then I can methodically execute the steps necessary to achieve that goal. Very similar to what we were discussing at the beginning of this conversation. Running isn't just good for, your emotional regulation and, making you feel good during the day after your run, but the long-term effect of being a consistent endurance runner is the fact that you get pretty tough and you start really believing in what you can do. And in hindsight, I don't think I would have as much professional success. I don't think I would have as many friends. I don't think I would have the same level of confidence in myself than I do now, as if I just didn't start running. If I was just a, quote unquote, a normal person, someone who wasn't running almost every day. So to me, it's been arguably the best decision of my entire life was to say, hey, I'd like to go start cross country and try to high jump. It was not only the best decision, I mean, it was also maybe the dumbest thing I've ever thought, because there's no high jumping in cross country. but in hindsight, not only was it maybe the stupidest idea I've ever had, it was also the best idea of my life.
Jason, thank you so much. Where would you like folks to contact you if they want to get into your running world?
Well, the Strength Running podcast is probably your first stop if you're into listening to podcasts, but my home base is strengthrunning.com. There you'll find our award-winning blog, all our different training programs and courses. We also have email courses. So I know we talked a little bit about, say, strength training, for example. I've set up these email courses where every day you're going to get an individual lesson on how to approach certain topics within the running world, whether it's weightlifting, injury prevention, working on your mindset. So no matter what you want to learn about, we have something for you. And then finally, if social media or video is more your thing, you can always find me on Twitter or Instagram at Jason Fitz1, or on the Strength Running YouTube channel.
Thank you. All of this will be added as resources to the show notes. And Jason, let's have a run day together one day.
Well, yes. Are you in France?
Half and half in
Okay.
France and half in the UK.
Okay. Well, if I'm ever in France, I admittedly don't have a trip planned, but I would love to, visit the site of the Paris Olympics. And if I do, I'll give you a
Sure.
call.
Sounds good. Well, I come to the US a lot, so maybe my trip to the US will be before your trip to Europe, and then we'll make that work.
I'll show you some of the best trails in the United States if you come to Colorado.
Oh, that's a plan then. We're on. I look forward to that, Jason.
I love it.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening in. I have a quick question for you now. What do you want to hear from me for our new latest episodes? Just give me a quick comment and let me know what you would like to hear about. Which topic are you passionate about? Which topic do you feel we haven't covered yet and you really want us to cover? Please let me know. This show is for you, and I want to know what you want to listen to. I can't wait to hear your feedback. Thank you.